What are you doing here?
I told you to stay away!
In a house filled with wealth and silence, two children lay awake every night, terrified of the darkness. Their father, a grieving widower, tried everything to give them peace, but nothing worked until she arrived, a new nanny, gentle, caring, strong, and different. Different in a way society never lets you forget. At first, it seemed like hope had returned. The children finally slept. But beneath the surface, prejudice was waiting, ready to strike. What began as comfort would soon twist into something unthinkable. Before the storm, there was calm. Before the cruelty, there was love. Her name was Amara, a young black woman with a heart full of warmth and hands that carried tenderness like no other. She had come into the life of a wealthy white family, not as a guest, not as an equal, but as their nanny. Yet, to the children she cared for, Amara was everything. She woke them with gentle songs in the morning, brushed their golden hair with care, and held them close when nightmares came in the night. The children adored her. Their laughter wrapped around her like sunlight, and in those innocent moments, Amara almost forgot the invisible lines drawn by society. The home itself was grand, a mansion with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and portraits of ancestors staring down from gilded frames. To outsiders, it was a symbol of success and prestige. But to Amara, it was also a cage, a place where her worth was measured not by her kindness, but by her skin. And yet, she stayed. Not for the family's wealth, not for the security of the job, but for the children. To her, they were her little world. Every smile she drew from them, every tear she wiped away gave her a sense of purpose. But beneath the surface, something darker simmered. The father of the house, a man with power and pride stitched into every word he spoke, never once looked at Amara without a shadow of disdain. His eyes lingered too long. His words carried unspoken warnings. She felt it, the weight of judgment pressing closer each day. Viewers, this is where our story begins, in the glow of innocence, inside a home of privilege, where love and hate lived under the same roof. And soon, Amara's devotion would collide with a cruel truth she could no longer ignore. At first, the cracks appeared small, almost invisible. A harsh word here, a cold glance there. But soon, those cracks widened into deep, jagged wounds. Amara would be serving breakfast at the long dining table, pouring juice into crystal glasses when the father's voice cut through the room. "Careful, don't spill. These aren't the cheap dishes you're used to." The children frowned, sensing the insult, but Amara only lowered her gaze. Her silence was her shield. Days later, she noticed something new. The mother of the house locking away her jewelry, whispering behind Amara's back, as if kindness had been replaced by suspicion, as if Amara's very presence was a threat. The tension grew sharper. One afternoon, the children clung to her skirt after their piano lesson, begging her to play with them outside. Their father stepped into the room, his jaw tight. "Inside, children. She's not here to play. She's the help." The words hung heavy, like a blade, slicing through her bond with them. For the first time, the children looked confused, torn between their love for Amara and the authority of their father. And yet, it didn't stop there. Each day became a test of endurance. She was blamed for things she never did. Missing silverware, a broken vase, even the children's tears. Accusations sharpened into cruelty, until Amara felt like she was walking through the house on glass,
each step more dangerous than the last. Still, her love for the children kept her strong. At night, she whispered stories to them, her voice trembling but steady, vowing silently to protect them from the storm building around her. But the storm was growing louder. One evening she overheard a conversation, the father, his voice filled with venom. "She's getting too close to them, too comfortable. I won't have it." Her heart pounded. What did he mean? What was he planning? The world inside that mansion was no longer safe, and Amara knew something terrible was coming.
The night was supposed to be ordinary. The children were asleep upstairs, the mansion wrapped in silence. Amara was in the kitchen, her hands still damp from washing dishes, when she heard it. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, cutting through the hole like thunder. The father appeared in the doorway, his face shadowed, his eyes burning with something darker than anger. In his hand, a crumpled piece of paper. "Do you think I don't see what you're doing?" he spat. "Sneaking your way into my children's hearts, trying to replace what they have with you?" Amara froze. "I've done nothing but care for them," she whispered, her voice shaking. But he stepped closer, his voice rising with venom. "You don't belong here. Not in this house, not in this world. And tonight, everyone will know it." Before she could react, he slammed the paper onto the counter. It was a forged letter, with Amara's name scrawled at the bottom. An accusation that she had stolen, that she had lied, that she had betrayed their trust. Her chest tightened, breath shallow. "This isn't mine." But even as the words left her lips, the mother appeared, her face pale with fury. Behind her, 2 police officers stepped into the kitchen. Their badges glinted under the dim light, their expressions already set with judgment. "Amara Davis, you're under arrest," one officer barked. The children woke to the sound of shouting, rushing downstairs in their pajamas, their small voices breaking the chaos. "Papa, no! She didn't do anything! She's our friend!" But their cries were drowned out by the clatter of handcuffs. Amara's wrists were bound, cold steel biting into her skin as tears blurred her vision. She tried to speak, to plead, but her voice was swallowed by the father's booming words. "You see? This is what happens when you let people like her too close. They take, they lie, they destroy." Her heart pounded. Every truth she had lived, every sacrifice, every ounce of love for those children was collapsing under the weight of a lie. And as the officers dragged her toward the door, the children's sobs echoing through the marble halls, Amara realized this wasn't just about her job. This was about her dignity, her very existence being erased in front of the only people who truly saw her. The mansion door slammed shut behind her, the sound final, unforgiving. The night air cut through her like a blade. She looked up at the sky, tears streaking her face, a single thought pounding in her mind. If they could strip her of everything this easily, what chance did she have to fight back? And yet, somewhere deep inside, a spark refused to die. Because this was not the end. This was the beginning of a war she never asked for, but one she could no longer run from. The cold air of that night stayed with Amara long after the door slammed shut behind her. She could still feel the metal cuffs on her wrists, the humiliation of being dragged away in front of the very children she had loved like her own. The police van carried her away from the mansion, its flashing lights cutting through the darkness like a cruel reminder that the truth didn't matter. Power did. Hours passed in the holding cell, the damp stone walls pressing in on her, every minute stretching like eternity. Amara sat on the narrow bench, her hands trembling as she replayed the scene over and over. The look in the children's eyes, terror, confusion, heartbreak. They had cried for her, screamed for her, but their voices were powerless against the machinery of wealth and privilege. When morning came, she was released. No evidence, no charges that could hold up. It should have been a relief, but the damage was already done. She had been branded. Whispered rumors spread faster than fire. Other families who had once smiled at her now avoided her gaze, their eyes darting away in judgment. Work dried up overnight. To the world, she was no longer a trusted caretaker, but a problem, a woman with a record. But the wound that cut deepest wasn't her lost job. It was the silence of the family she had served. The children who loved her were silenced, their words dismissed as childish nonsense. And the parents? They never spoke her name again. Weeks turned into months. Amara struggled to rebuild. She found smaller jobs, cleaning houses, babysitting for families who didn't ask too many questions. But the weight of what had happened never left her shoulders. It wasn't just about a false accusation. It was about being reduced to nothing more than her skin color. About being told without words that no matter how much she gave, how much she loved, how hard she worked, she would never be allowed to truly belong. And yet, in that pain, something grew. Amara began to speak, quietly at first at community meetings, then louder at rallies, at churches, at schools. She told her story, not just what happened in the mansion, but of the countless little cuts that came before. The stares, the whispers, the way she was always seen as the help, never as a woman with dreams, never as someone equal. Her voice shook at first, but with each telling it grew stronger, and as she spoke, others came forward. People who had suffered in silence, who had endured their own humiliations, their own battles with racism. Her story became more than her pain. It became a mirror for countless others who saw themselves in her. Years later, when she looked back, Amara realized something profound. The night she thought was her downfall was the very night her life began to change. It stripped her of illusions. It broke her heart, yes, but it also revealed her strength. The children she once cared for, they grew older. And though their parents tried to erase Amara from their memories, they never forgot. As teenagers, they found her again. They apologized for what they couldn't stop, for the injustice they witnessed but were powerless to change. And in their tears, she found healing. But let's be clear, Amara's story isn't just hers. It's the story of millions silenced by prejudice, of opportunity stolen, of dignity stripped away. It's about the way society still looks at skin color before character, about the way power shields those who harm and crushes those who dare to simply exist. And that's the haunting truth of racism. It doesn't always wear a hood or carry a torch. Sometimes it hides behind polite smiles, expensive suits, and manicured lawns. Sometimes it speaks in whispers instead of shouts. And sometimes, as Amara learned, it destroys quietly, with lies more powerful than fists. But here's the impact we must never forget. Amara refused to let that night define her as a victim. She chose to rise, to turn her wound into a weapon of truth. She became a voice, and that voice sparked change in ways the father of that mansion could never have imagined. Because every time she stood up to tell her story, she reminded the world, we are not invisible, we are not disposable, and we will not be erased. So, as this story closes, ask yourself, how many Amaras live around us? Women, men, children, silenced, dismissed, pushed aside simply because of the color of their skin. How many voices are still waiting to be heard? And more importantly, what will you do the next time you see injustice unfold before your eyes? Will you stay silent, letting lies shape the world? Or will you speak, act, and stand for those who cannot?
Because racism doesn't end with one story, or one family, or one mansion. It ends when each of us decides that silence is no longer an option. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you feel, don't let it end here. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because together we can keep shining light on stories the world too often tries to keep in the dark. Because in the end, silence protects the oppressor, but truth will always protect the oppressed.